Good afternoon, class of grade 11, 2021. My name is Mr. Yilo from Moteo Education District. I am here today again to do economics. So, as normal, you are requested to gather all the resources that you need, all those resources that you need to use in order for you to be able to follow this presentation through. So today we are doing a chapter, the first chapter in term 3, titled Economic Growth and Economic Development. Now, very important, I want us to look at the concept of economic growth and economic development. It is very much important for you as a learner to understand the difference between the term economic growth and economic development, because oftentimes people use these terms interchangeably, which means they refer to economic growth as economic development and economic development as economic growth. So these two terms are not the same, they are different. Now I want us to look first at what economic growth is. So economic growth refers to an increase in the production of goods and services in a country. It is an increase in the production of goods and services within a country in a specific period of time. Now, when production in a country increases, that is a sign of economic growth, because then the country's capacity to produce goods and services increases. You will remember from the chapter on circular flow that production is the responsibility of businesses, the firms, which means production is undertaken primarily by the firms or the businesses. And when the firms are producing goods and services, they need to use the factors of production. To remind us of those factors of production a little bit, we refer to the natural resources, we refer to labor, we refer to capital and entrepreneurship. Those are the factors of production, which means for businesses to be able to produce goods and services, factors of production needs to be used. We will be looking at these factors of production perhaps very late in the chapter today still. And then what we also need to know in as far as economic growth is concerned is that we measure economic growth by means of a gross domestic product, that is the GDP. In other words, when there is an increase in the gross domestic product of the country, then we can say that there is economic growth. So that is what economic growth is all about. Economic growth is about the increase in the production capacity within the country. And then you will remember again the GDP itself. We said that the GDP is an indicator that is used for economic growth. So you remember the GDP itself is defined as the measure of all the goods and services that are produced within the borders of a country in a specific period of time, and that is normally a year. So down here I have a picture. So you would see this is production. Production is taking place here. As you can see that this is a business that manufactures cars. So we can see there are people there that are working, they are busy in the production, there are machines which are used in this production process. Remember I said earlier on that for production to take place, the factors of production needs to be used. So obviously what are those factors of production? Definitely from the picture itself we can see labor which is represented by the workers, the people that are working there, and of course there are some of the machines, they might not be very visible from the picture itself, but definitely those machines that are used there would now be another production factors that are used in the production of these cars. So when production increases, more people are getting employment. That is another thing. Economic growth is very good for that. When the production capacity of a country increases, then it means more people in the country are going to get employed. And when the people get employed, obviously they would receive income in a form of wages or salaries. And with their income, they are then be able to meet their basic needs and wants. And once they are now able to meet their basic needs and wants, it leads us to economic development. So I want us to look at economic development. So economic development. Economic development is different from economic growth, as it refers to an increase in the standard of living within a country over time. Very important, here is the keyword for economic development. Economic development is about improvement in the standard of living of the people. So we can see economic development when people now afford to live much better lives than before. Example, we can see economic development when people move away from shacks and they build themselves houses, and when people are now buying cars and no longer pedestrians, when people or when the government of our country is able to provide to its citizens infrastructure in a country. So, very important, economic growth would focus on the things. And what are those things? Economic growth, remember, is about production. So it focuses on things such as goods, it focuses on things such as services that can be produced by the businesses within a country. But economic development, on the other side, it is not about goods, it is not about services that are produced. But economic development focuses really now on people. Economic growth focuses on things, but economic development focuses on people. So economic development is about, remember, I've just alluded to that earlier on, is about an improvement in the standard of living, when the quality of life of people gets better from what it has been previously. Now, down here, I also have two pictures which would show you an example of economic development. So if you look at the picture here, you see a child, a school child, living in a very, 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 very underdeveloped community. A child who lives in an area where it's shacks, it looks more like it is informal settlement. There is no services to these people. However, once there is economic development happens when the very same people who could not afford to live good lives, who could not afford the best quality of life, are now able to build themselves houses. The government provides to them infrastructure such as electricity. The government is able to build the roads. The government is availing water for people. Then malls, the bridges, you name it. Then that is when now economic development takes place. So economic development, it looks at the quality of people, people's lives, but economic growth focuses more on the production of goods and services. But very important for us to understand is that in order for economic development to take place, then we need to first have economic growth. There should be economic growth before there is economic development. In other words, economic growth is the mother of economic development. Why do I say that economic growth is the mother of economic development? Because we first need our country to experience growth. We need our countries to be able to produce more goods and services. Businesses in our country must be able to enlarge their plants so that they are able to increase their production. But now, very important, when production increases, there is no way that production in a country can increase without employing more workers. So as people are getting employed because of an increase in the production of the country, then those people, as I've alluded earlier on, they will now be able to receive an income. With the income that they receive, remember, they will now be able to meet their basic needs and wants. They will build themselves houses. They will live the quality of life which they have always wished to live. So that is why we say economic growth is the mother of economic development. We need economic growth to take place first, then economic growth will make economic development possible. And we will look into this a little bit later on today. Now, there are two concepts that I want us to look at. There are two very important concepts that I want us to look at. We are going to look at income, and we are also going to look at wealth. Maybe the reason why we're looking at this, the question is, why is it that we're living in a country why are we living in countries where people are so highly unequal? Why is it that in a country other people are able to perhaps afford much better life than other people? And really the answer to that question is because of income and wealth. So we are going to look at what income is and what wealth is. So we'll begin first with wealth. Wealth of a person, we're talking about the wealth of a person or a wealth of a business or a wealth of a country, is the monetary value of all the assets that, the net assets that they own. So in other words, when do we say a person is wealthy? What do we refer to in order to say that this person is wealthy? Can we see wealth with our naked eyes? The answer to this is that a wealth of a person itself, or a wealth of a business or a wealth of a country, is measured by the monetary value of the net assets that they own. And why do we say net assets? We say net assets because the value of all the assets that a person owns minus the value of liabilities owned at a time. In other words, why we say net? In other words, every time when we say net, it means something has been deducted. For example, to make an example so that you may understand, is that if I buy a car now, if I buy a car and I use a debt to buy a car, I take a loan to buy a car, what you need to understand is that I still have to repay the car. But I may repay the car, maybe on my 4th year of repaying the car, I might be left with only 1 year to finish off the car. So which means a great amount of that car I would have paid for, and a less amount of it would still be the amount of money that I owe to the dealership. Now, what happens is that if now I want to sell the car, which means portion of that money when I sell the car is going to be mine. Now, however, I still need to pay the liability. I still need to pay the amount remaining to pay off the car from the dealership. So which means if I sell my car for 80,000 and then I still have 20,000 to pay to the dealership, then it means 60,000 will be mine and the 20,000 will have to repay the dealership, which is the company which have bought a car for me. So that is why we say that your net assets is the value of all your assets owned minus the value of the liabilities out at the time. Assets can be anything tangible, which means if we say something is tangible, we say it's something that you can physically hold or it's something that you can touch. For example, your tangible assets can be land. Some people have land, some businesses have capital. Or assets can also be intangible. Intangible would mean something that you cannot touch, something that you cannot hold. For example, that is the intellectual property of a person, such as the patent rights or the copyrights of a product that they have invented. So that would still be the assets. The assets of a business could still be a property. It could be the vehicles of the business. It could be the equipment that is owned by the business at the time. What is wealth? And maybe a question for you would be, what then would be the assets of your parents? What assets do you think that your parents have, which can be of monetary value, which we can look at and refer to as wealth? What is it that your parents have in a form of assets, which can be converted into money, in other words? Maybe it's a question that you need to think about, because whatever assets that you may know of your parents which they have, then obviously it means that they do have some sort of wealth, because anyway such assets, when they are disposed of, they may bring in some kind of income for your parents. And then what is income? Income is a reward that owners of the factors of production receive for selling their factors of production. I repeat again, income is the reward that the owners of the factors of production receive for selling their factors of production. Remember from the chapter on circular flow, we have learned that factors of production are owned by the households. And every time when they sell factors of production, they must get some remuneration. So you'll remember that if a person sells their labor, they receive wages and salaries in return as their income. When they sell natural resources, they receive rent as their income. When they sell capital, then they would receive interest as income. And when, of course, for entrepreneurship, they would receive profit as their income. So income is just the reward that owners of factors of production receives for selling their factors of production. Sources of wealth. Sources of wealth. Where can people get wealth? Or where can they get wealth, or where do people get wealth? Now, wealth can be generated from the following sources. Wealth can be generated from entrepreneurial activities. So the entrepreneurial activities, that is when maybe a person starts a business. Obviously, people who start businesses, they are creating wealth for themselves. Because remember, when this business blooms, then they will be getting profit. And with that profit, then it would help them to live the kind of life that they've always wanted to live with their families. Again, people can generate wealth from inheritance. People can generate wealth from inheritance. Inheritance, sometimes some of us are coming from very affluent families. So you come from a family that is very affluent, family that is very rich. So when your parents pass on, what happens is that they leave their wealth behind for their children. And then you inherit the wealth that was your parents. And as a result of that, you become wealthy by virtue of your parents. So some of us, we are wealthy because of inheritance. Your parents, when they die, they leave you a house, they leave you whatever of wealth that they had. And then you become wealthy as a result of inheritance. However, the most important source of wealth can be generated most importantly from savings. People who are able to save money from their income. Savings is the very most savings are the most important source of generating wealth for people. And it's unfortunate that we are living in a country where people do not save. We are living from hand to mouth. Whichever income we have, we really do not have much to save from. So we take the income that we have and it's just enough for expenditure. We do not have a surplus to save. However, savings are the really most important source of wealth. Now, I want us to look at how different participants within the economy can create wealth through savings. Now, how do households create wealth for themselves through savings? Now, households, they can create wealth for themselves by deciding not to spend all of their income. When they receive an income, they may decide not to spend all of this income. Rather, they would have a portion of their income set aside as savings. And then, or part of their income they do not spend is known as savings. The more their savings accumulate, which means the more the savings of their household grows, then it means they are able to form wealth. Secondly, businesses. How do businesses create wealth through maybe savings? Businesses go through the very same process as the individuals. The very same way as households create wealth by savings, so does the businesses. They accumulate wealth by investing in land, by investing in buildings, by investing in equipment. So when they do that, it means they are saving, because the land in its own, the land that is the land where they are going to build the businesses. The building of the businesses is where the business will be conducted. And the equipment, which is the capital that the business would use. All these three things together, they are able to generate money for these businesses. And then obviously that money is wealth for these businesses. Then the government. The government can save if it has a surplus on its budget. So remember, the government receives income, the revenue, the income of the government comes from the taxes that are paid by all the economic agents. So now, as we pay taxes, the government may use the money for taxes in order to meet the needs of the country. So if it happens that there is a surplus in the budget, that means the current expenditure of the government for a specific financial year is less than the current income. Then it means the savings can be used to obtain the land, the savings can be used to buildings, the savings can be used to also providing infrastructure within the country. I hope that was self-explaining. The distribution of wealth and income. How is wealth and income distributed? So there is a difference between the distribution of wealth and the distribution of income. How wealth is distributed amongst the citizens of the country and how income is distributed amongst the citizens of a country, it's different. So we are going to look now at the distribution of wealth, how wealth is distributed. So the distribution of wealth refers to the way in which the assets of a country are divided amongst the citizens. How the government of the country decides to divide the assets of the country amongst all the citizens of the country. Now, some people within the country, they have more assets than others. So this means that wealth is not equally distributed amongst the people. Because if we all are the people of the same country, in all fairness, it means that all of us should be, all the wealth of our country should be shared equally amongst us all, so that nobody has a bigger portion of wealth than the other. However, in reality within South Africa and in most of the developing countries, we see that the wealth of a country is never divided equally amongst the citizens, because there are more of the citizens of a country who has the larger portion of the wealth than other people. And because of that, because of the gap that exists between those who have more and those who have less, we can clearly see that wealth within a country is not distributed equally or evenly amongst the people. Now, people are either employed in different jobs while other people remains unemployed. So there is again another discrepancy, the haves and the have-nots. So there are people that are working, there are people that remains unemployed. Others have more skills and better education. However, others do not have any skills and others do not even have education. People with different age groups could also have different levels of wealth. And indeed, this is also true. In other words, let me go back a little bit. So you would realize that people who are employed are more likely to have wealth, more wealth, than those that are unemployed, even though they live in the same country. that on its own shows that the wealth is not distributed equally. When we look at the issues of skills and education, people who have skills, people who have education are more likely to get themselves good paying jobs, and those who do not have the skills might not be able to get the good paying jobs or might not even be able to score themselves jobs at all. So one thing that we can learn again in as far as the distribution of wealth is concerned, we can see that those that have got skills and better education are more likely to get more portion of the wealth of the country than those who do not have skills and education. Age group also plays role in as far as wealth is concerned. Most of the wealth is found with elderly people. People that are much older than young people are the ones who most of the times have wealth. And this may be because of the experience that they may have, the experience in work and all that. So age group also could have different levels of wealth. And in most cases, you find that those that are senior citizens may have more wealth than those that are young. Because in most cases, when a young person wants jobs, they would be told that they need to first experience. They need to first have an experience before they can then be able to be employed. So that on its own, it causes or it puts the young generation in a disadvantage in as far as the distribution of wealth is concerned. All these gaps of wealth between the people, they signify that not everybody in the country enjoys the same standard of living. Other people enjoys a better and a good standard of living than the other. We are still going to look at the reasons and how maybe the government tried to solve this problem in our country. So let us look at how income is distributed then. Income distribution is the amount of income that people earn in a country. I repeat, income distribution looks at the amount of money that people earn in a country. So in a developing country such as South Africa, income is distributed such that the poorest of the population will earn the least of the total income, and the rich earns most of the total income. Which means in the developing countries such as South Africa, the large majority of the people is poor, and the very same people which constitute the largest percentage of the population of the country, they are earning the least from the total income of the country. And the minority, which is rich, are the ones who are earning most of the total income of the country. This is because wealth is generated from savings. So savings are generated from an income. So people that are poor, they have no means of saving. And if they are unable to save, then it means they do not have, if they are unable to save, then there is no way that they may be able to afford to live the life they need. Why? Because in order for them to save, they need to have an income. Now, we have a largest percentage of unemployment in South Africa as matter stands. South Africa, the last time I checked in South Africa, the unemployment rate was 32 point something percent. So obviously, that shows that a large majority of people in South Africa, and in particular the young people, are the ones who are unemployed right now. And when they are unemployed, it means they do not have income. And if they do not have income, then it means they are unable to save. And if they are unable to save, there is no way they can generate wealth for themselves. So that is the problem. Let us look, for example, at this scenario, which would explain income inequality. Let us take our hypothetical economy. We assume that we live in a country which has a total income of 300,000. And this country has only a population of 5 people. Now we know that in reality, there is no country that may have only 5 citizens. I am just coming with this example just to make you understand the issue of income inequality. So in our hypothetical world, we are a country that has a total income of 300,000, and this country has got only 5 citizens. Now, if income was distributed equally amongst all the citizens of the country, then it means each citizen would receive at least, or it would earn 60,000 per year. So if you take 60,000 multiplied by 5, it would give you 300,000. So if that was the case, then it means there would be income equality. Nobody would benefit more than the other, because all 5 citizens per year, they receive an income of 60,000. But let us look at the situation where now out of the 5 people in this country, 2 of them, they share 200,000. Out of the 5 people in the country, only 2 of them share 200,000. What does this say? It says there is only 100,000 which is remaining. Because remember, our country makes a total of 300,000 per year. So obviously this 100,000 has got to be shared by 3 people in a country, whereas 2 people share 2 people share 200,000 of the total income, which means the minority is sharing a large percentage of the total income of the country, and the majority is sharing the less amount of income from the total income of the country. And this scenario shows us exactly what is income inequality. So in South Africa, like in many other developing states or developing countries, that is the problem. This scenario depicts exactly what is happening in reality, where you find that the large majority are sharing from the little income of the country, and the minority are the ones that are sharing from the large percentage of the income of the country. Now, let us look at the reason why income is distributed unequally. What could cause income to be distributed unequally amongst the people within the country? Number one, we may look at wealth. People do not have the same amount of wealth. Example, wealth in a form of assets, wealth in a form of stock, and other forms of wealth. So we do not have the same amount of wealth. So when people have wealth, in other words, when people have assets, or when people are able to invest in stock, then what happens is that such a person who invests in a stock market, they may do that by buying shares for themselves. Now, when they buy shares for themselves, those shares becomes assets for them or to them. And as those shares becomes their assets, shares over time, as they increase in their value, the companies would pay dividends to the shareholders. So if then they receive the dividends, if the shareholders receive dividends, then this means that those dividends becomes now an additional income to who? It becomes an additional to a person who is a shareholder, who has got wealth. Now, people who do not have wealth, it means they have not invested in buying shares, or they have not invested in any assets. So they have no means of generating an additional income. Unlike a person who has got wealth, a person who has assets, a person who has stock. Because when those assets that they own have got ways of bringing in additional income to them, which someone else may not have ways of getting such additional income by virtue of not having any kind of wealth. Unemployment also is one of the reasons that causes income to be unevenly distributed. Unemployment is one of the reasons that causes income to be unequally distributed. Most people in our country are unemployed. I have explained earlier on that South Africa has now, because of COVID, the highest percentage of unemployment, which was 32 point something percent. Now, large majority of people who are unemployed are those who do not have skills, as I have said. They do not have skills because they do not have education or qualifications. Now, there has been a decrease in demand for unskilled labor. So most employers really are no longer demanding people who have got no skills. So the demand for people who can work without skills has dropped drastically. However, there is more demand now for people who have got skills. People who are educated, such as doctors, the teachers, the educators, the engineers, the nurses, you name them. So that also causes income to be unevenly distributed. Because then what does it say? It means that those who have got more skills, those who are skilled, are now getting income, which is more, or even those who do not have income, who do not have employment, are not receiving anything. So it means the total income of the country is the one that goes is the one that goes to pay those that are skilled workers. So the last one, it's discrimination. Discrimination also plays role in unequal distribution of income. People from previously disadvantaged groups, and when we talk about previously disadvantaged groups, in South Africa we're talking about blacks, we're talking about coloureds, we're talking about Indians. Those are the people that were previously disadvantaged because of apartheid laws. The apartheid laws, which gave preferential treatment to other people based on their skin colors over others. So now, because now of the discrimination, what happens? It means those people that are from previously disadvantaged backgrounds, they did not have opportunities for them to be educated, for them to be able to take advantage of the economy of their country. So it's only now that they start getting good paying jobs under the democratic government. So, and most of them now, because they really come from families that are not affluent, they still have to plow back home. Instead of immediately generating wealth for themselves, they have to plow back home. They need to take care of the families back at home. So most of these people, as I said, they are coming from humble backgrounds with low wealth base. And as a result, when they start even getting those better paying jobs, they need to take care of the situation back at home. The other factor, it is gender discrimination. Gender discrimination, that was when people would be discriminated on the basis of their gender, whether they are because they are females or males. So women have traditionally been earning less than men. So you would find previously that a man and a woman would be employed on a very same position, but a man would be paid more than a woman because of their gender. However, in South Africa, there is a slow change that is taking place. One can only hope that as time goes, things would change. So these are the three things that really causes income to be distributed unequally. They might not be limited to this. You might also think of others that are relevant. Measuring inequality, measuring income inequality. So when we measure income inequality, there are two ways by which income inequality is measured. Income inequality is measured, number one, by using Lorenz curve. Secondly, income inequality can also be measured by the Gini coefficient. The first way of measuring inequality, it is by Lorenz curve. The second way of measuring inequality, it is by the Gini coefficient. Now let us look at Lorenz curve. What is Lorenz curve? Lorenz curve is a way of demonstrating on a graph the distribution of population income. It's a way of showing by means of a graph how the income is distributed amongst the population. So, right there on the screen, this graph, it is your Lorentz curve. This graph is your Lorentz curve. So, what happens with the Lorentz curve? On your y-axis, on your y-axis is your national income. The national income needs to come to your y-axis. And on your x-axis, it is the population of the country. So your Lorentz curve should always be up to 100% in both the sides. In both the side of the national income and the side of the population. So what do we say in Lorentz curve? We say if income was distributed equally amongst all the citizens of a country, then it would be represented by this curve. Maybe I need to draw it so that my explanation should be much understandable. Let me try to do it in a form of a drawing so that you can understand me better. Just a minute. So, let us look at the Lorentz curve. Oh, sorry for that. This is our Lorentz curve. So, this is how we draw the Lorentz curve. This is our y-axis. This is our x-axis. So, on your y-axis, this is our national income. And on our x-axis, this is our population, which means people that are living in a country. So basically, Lorentz curve for both sides needs to be 100%. It needs to be up to 100%. 100%. Then, if income was distributed equally, our Lorentz curve would look like this. In other words, in this case, we say income is distributed equally. So this line is a line of equal distribution of income. This line is a line of equal distribution of income. Why do we say that? Let us do it. Because let's say 5% of income, national income, would go to 5% of the population. If 50% of income would go to 50% of the population. 100% of income, if all the income is used to the population, it would still be received by 100% of the population. So what does that mean? It means that income will be evenly distributed, equally to all the people of the country, to all the population of the country. However, you might find that is not always the case. So this is our Lorentz curve, the one denoted, drawn in green color. That is the one which we call our Lorentz curve. So instead of the 5% of the income be distributed to 5% of the population, let's look. The 5% of the income might be shared by, let's say, 53% of the population. Do you see that? And then if you look at the 50% of the income, if at all, would be shared by almost not even 100% of the income. So that is exactly what the Lorentz curve is trying to show us. So let me go back to the presentation so that you can see what I mean again. So if income was distributed perfectly, obviously it would be on this line, the line of perfect equality, where 20% of the population of the national income is received by 20% of the population. But in this case, just look, 5% of the population is received by 20% of the, 25% of the national income is received by 20% of the population. So which shows that the largest percentage of the population is sharing from a very small percentage of the national income. So our Lorentz curve is this curve, the one that is bowed outward. And then there is a gap between the line of perfect equality and our Lorentz curve. That gap is called the inequality gap. This is the gap that shows the inequality. So the bigger the gap, the more unequal income is distributed within the country. Now, the following deductions can be made from the Lorentz curve. The more evenly spread incomes are, the more the Lorentz curve would look like the line of perfect equality, as I'm saying here. On this line, this is a line of perfect equality, which shows that income is distributed equally to all of us. And then the more uneven the distribution of income, the greater the Lorentz curve. So once income becomes unequal or greater, highly unequal, our Lorentz curve would even become bigger than here. And then the area between the line of perfect equality and the Lorentz curve is called the inequality gap. The area we're talking about is the space between the line of perfect equality and, of course, the Lorentz curve itself. Now, let us look at the other method of measuring income inequality. Remember, I said we can do that by means of a Gini coefficient. Measuring income distribution by means of an equal distribution by means of Gini coefficient. So the Gini coefficient is used in conjunction with the Lorentz curve, which means they must be used together. When you use the Gini coefficient, you need to integrate it to the Lorentz curve. It is the method that is used to evaluate the country's inequality. So this is our Lorentz curve as it is. Remember, this is our line A. It is called line of perfect equality. B, it is our Lorentz curve. And C, it is our inequality gap. So in order for you to calculate the Gini coefficient, the formula that you need to use to calculate the Gini coefficient is equals to, Gini coefficient is equals to C divided by C plus D. So what is that C? C, it is the area of what? It is this area, our income inequality. So Gini coefficient is equals to income inequality divided by income inequality plus D. D is the area outside of the Lorentz curve. Then your answer will always be in a ratio between 0 and 1. So you will always get an answer that is between 0 and 1. It can be 0, it can be 0.5, it can be 0.7, 0.9, 1, whichever the case may be as you calculate. So very important, when you calculate the Gini coefficient and you get the answer, when you calculate your Gini coefficient and you get the answer that is equal to 0, it means all the people get exactly the same income. So there is perfect equality of income distribution. But once you calculate the Lorentz curve and you get the answers that are very close to 1, or you get the answers that is 1, then it means income in this particular country is unequally distributed. Any number that is closer to 0 may mean that income is is equally distributed. But any number that is closer to 0, closer to 1, shows that income is unequally distributed amongst the members of the country. Now, with that being said, I would love to take a 5 minutes break so that from this 5 minutes break we can finish off this chapter. See you in 5 minutes time. Thank you. Welcome back, learners. So let us take from where we have left. Remember, I was explaining to you that the other method of calculating, the other way of measuring income inequality, it is by Gini coefficient, which needs to be used in conjunction with the Lorenz curve. And I gave you the formula that to calculate that it is C, which is the income gap, divided by the income gap plus the area outside of the Lorenz curve, represented by the letter D. So when your answer is 0, it means income is equally distributed. When the answer is 1, it means income is highly unevenly distributed. So any values, any answers that are closer to 0 would show that income is not highly unequally distributed. But any values closer to 1 shows that income is highly unequally distributed. So let us now look at the methods that are used to redistribute income and wealth. What methods are used in South Africa by the government to redistribute income and wealth? So the government uses land restitution and land redistribution. What is land restitution or land redistribution? It is the policy that is used by the government to take the assets, such as the land, from those who currently owns the land and give it to other individuals or groups who do not have the land at all. Secondly, the government may use redistribution through growth. In other words, the government is redistributing income at the same time the government is redistributing wealth and income with the aim of achieving economic growth at the same time. So here the government in South Africa adopted RDP policy, that is the Reconstruction and Development Product, RDP, which was first adopted in 1994. So when you talk about RDP, you will remember the low-cost housings, the houses, RDP houses, that the government had built for people who really do not have means. So that was the way of redistributing wealth. The government also in 1996 adopted another policy, which was Growth, Employment and Redistribution Strategy. We call it GER. GER was adopted in 1996. Obviously, the aim of the policy was to create economic growth, to also create employment, and to redistribute wealth and income within the country. And then the other methods that are used for redistribution, we can say those are the growth through redistribution. Growth through redistribution. And that is as GISA, the Accelerated and Shared Growth Initiative for South Africa. So as GISA is the policy, or it is the strategy that aimed at developing the skills of the nation, the skills of the people within the country, improving the labor efficiency, and also removing the barriers to growth, to business growth. That was as GISA. So as GISA aims to promote issues such as employment creation and also poverty eradication or reduction within the country. Now, let us look at other methods that the government may use to redistribute income. Income and wealth. The government may use subsidies and incentives. So, in other words, a subsidy is a financial grant that is offered to government, that is offered by government to businesses to reduce their cost of production so that they may also be able to sell at cheaper prices. The government may also provide incentives to businesses for them to go and establish in those areas areas that do not have much economic activity, so that at least people in those areas may be able to get employed by those businesses as they are attracted to those areas where nothing much economically is happening. So the government also redistribute by means of minimum wages. Obviously, a minimum wage is a minimum amount of money that people who are doing unskilled labor may be paid, at least if they work specific hours a day, and of course for a specific number of days. So minimum wage in South Africa currently is 3,500 for those people who are working, for example, as farmers, for those people who are working as full-time domestic workers and all those. So that is the minimum amount of money they may be paid, nothing less. However, they may be paid more if the employer affords to pay more than the minimum wage. Education and training. The government has also been using education and training as the method of redistribution. Remember, we said that people who are wealthy or because they have some sort of education, skills, and training. So obviously, if the government is investing in education and training, the government may provide free education to learners. The government may provide bursaries to learners and even the workers, so that they may improve on their education and they may be able to get promotions if there are promotional opportunities at their workplace, or even learners might be able to get good jobs, good paying jobs, because they are educated. Welfare systems. The government also uses the welfare systems such as the social grants to different people who do not have any means. So the government pays the social grants. All different types of social grants are paid out as a method of redistributing to those who do not have. Now, the government also puts in place legislations. These legislations are the Labor Relations Act, which looks at the relationships between the employer and the employee. It looks at the issues of the relationships that are existing between employer and employee. There must be good working relations between the employer and the employee. And of course, the other act is that which is the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, which looks at the conditions of employment. In other words, it looks at issues such as if you've been working, you deserve to take a leave for 21 days, you deserve a maternity leave, you deserve to have a break and all that. And then the Skills Development Act. The Skills Development Act, it looks at the skills, provisioning of skills within the country. So businesses, those that are paying 500,000 per year in salaries, they are expected to register for skills levy, and then as they register for skills levy, they pay 1% of the total amount they pay in salaries to a relevant SETA, and whenever there is a training that they need to conduct, they would claim from the SETA so that the SETA may be able to fund the training. And then there is Employment Equity Act. Employment Equity Act, it looks at employment equality. In other words, people should not get employment because by virtue of their skin color, or they should not get employed because they are men and all that. So it looks at the issues of equality within the workplace. So those legislations have been put by the government and as methods of redistribution. The government can also use tax as method of redistribution. The progressive tax, remember we spoke about government financing education, government financing social grants and all those. But where does the government get money? So remember that the government gets money from the taxes. So the government would take the money from the taxes or from the taxpayers and be able to redistribute money to different needs of the country. So here we can look at the progressive tax, which is the pay as you earn. Those who earn high would pay more tax, and those who earn less would pay less tax. Estate duties, that is the tax that is paid by the people who have got properties as they buy properties or selling of the properties. The capital gains tax. Capital gain tax is the tax that you pay from your, for example, if you have invested in shares and all that, and then you're getting your returns on investments, then you can pay tax. That would be the capital gain tax. And also the other acts such as the broad-based black empowerment, black economic empowerment. So the BEE. BEE is just an act which was put in place by the government in effort to see that the previously disadvantaged people, the blacks in particular, be the people who are, of course, taking role in the mainstream economy of their own country. So you remember the BEE has got 7 pillars. I'm not going to look at those 7 pillars of BEE with you now. I believe that those that are doing business studies, they will do these 7 pillars of BEE in detail in grade 12. And then let us now look at economic growth. We are about to conclude the chapter. Let us look at economic growth. You'll remember at the beginning of the chapter, I had explained to you that economic growth is measured by the production capacity of a country when the country is able to produce more goods and services. So GDP is the economic indicator that is used to measure economic growth. I have also alluded to that earlier on at the beginning of the chapter. So how would we calculate economic growth? I have a scenario here, an example here. So please, this example should only be seen as example, not a true story. It is not a true reflection of what is happening currently in the country. So here you have the GDP for year 2005, and you also have the real GDP for 2006. And in 2005, you are given that the real GDP was 1.541 million. Oh, sorry for that. The GDP in 2005 was 1.541 million, and the GDP in 2006 was 1.621 million. So you are given the figures of these 2 years. It may be the previous year and this year, and you are expected to calculate the economic growth rate. With what percent has the economy grown from 2005 to 2006? So in order for you to do that, you must take, let me give you the formula in writing so that you can see what is done there. I'm just going to write it in a piece of paper so that you can be able to see it visually. So calculation of the economic growth, here is the formula. Growth rate would be equal to the GDP, real GDP of year 2 minus the GDP of year 1 divided by the GDP of year 1. And, oh, sorry for that. The GDP of year 2 minus the GDP of year 1 divided by the GDP of year 1. Everything should be multiplied by 100 over 1. That is the formula you must use. So in this particular case, it means now our year 2 is 2006. So we are going to take the value of 2006, we minus the value of 2005, we divide by the value of 2005. Then we multiply all that by 100 over 1. Let's go back to the slide presentation. So this is what I have been saying. The value of 2006, year 2, 2006 is year 2 because year 2005 came first and then 2006 came second. So we use 2006 as year 2. So that is 1.621 minus year 1, 1.541 divided by year 1, 1.541 multiplied by 100 over 1. And the answer there is 5.19 So which means our GDP growth rate between 2005 and 2006, the GDP has grown by 5.19%. However, I'm just saying this is just an example which should teach you how to calculate economic growth rate. Now, let us look at why economic growth is so important. So economic growth is very, very important because when there is economic growth in the country, it would lead to a decrease in poverty. And why is it that poverty will decrease? Poverty decreases because economic growth creates employment for people. So which means unemployment also reduces because people would get jobs in the process. And then economic growth is also important for reducing the government budget deficit. Government budget deficit is when the budget of the government is not enough to meet the needs of the country. So whenever the government does not have enough money to meet the needs of the country, it would borrow money. So if there is economic growth, the government would not run at a deficit in terms of its budget, and there will be no need for government to go and borrow money from the IMF or other institution from which the government can borrow. The economic growth is very much important as it also increases government social spending, such as in education and in health, without increasing tax. So obviously we know that the government finances everything from the taxes. Like for example, the education, the health, and many other needs of the country are financed from the taxes. So obviously if there is economic growth, the government would not necessarily increase the tax that people pay in order for it to be able to meet all its commitments of the country. Methods of increasing economic growth. How can economic growth be increased? Economic growth can be increased by improving the factor inputs. So by improving the factor inputs, we mean by improving the factors of production. For example, we may talk about workers. Workers, remember, they provide labor. Labor is the factor of production. So obviously, if you invest in the workers, if you give workers training, if you give workers education, then such people will then accumulate good skills which they may be able to use in the production within the country. And as they are able to produce much better, then obviously there will be growth within the country. And of course, economic growth may be increased by increasing the productivity of business. Increasing the productivity of business, it might happen by means of government giving the businesses free advisory service. When government gives the advices to the businesses in terms of the weather forecast or in terms of the export markets that are available out there, by reducing the administrative cost of the business, by providing infrastructure to the business, the infrastructure that the business would need, and then technological changes. Technological changes may also be important for economic growth, because in the production process, you would remember now that technology needs to be used. So obviously, if the businesses that are producing goods and services consistently invest in new technology, so every time when new technology is announced, then they are able to take advantage of such technology. It would help them to be able to produce more faster, more quality products than before. And at the same time, production would increase and there would be growth in the country. The government should also bring sound government policies, some policies which would help the country to grow, because some other policies, if they are not good enough, they may destroy the country. Policies, we spoke about different policies that the government had put in place, such as the RDP, the ASGISA. We have the NDP now, the National Development Plan, which is still in action in South Africa. So the government can come up with different policies that would help the economy to grow. What are those things that blocks growth? What are the barriers to growth? What hinders economic growth? Economic growth is hindered by the low levels of capital investment. So if there is a low level of investment in capital, then obviously there won't be much growth. If the business do not invest in best quality machines of the latest technology, for example, they won't be able to produce efficiently and effectively in order for economy to grow. And then the shortage of skilled labor. Of course, if we are in a country where we have large majority of people who do not have skills, then obviously our country will not grow, because we need people that are skilled. We need people that are skilled in many different aspects of life. We need the scientists, we need the economists, we need all people from different aspects of life in order for them to contribute jointly in effort to grow the country. And then HIV and AIDS also was a problem, especially in many years back, was a problem which was hindering growth, because you would find that most of the people that were dying from HIV are the very same young people who have got skills. So which means a country would lose people with skills every now and then as a result of HIV and AIDS. Because remember, a skill lost is not a skill that can be recovered in a day, or a skill that may be recovered in a year. If we lose a doctor now, it may take 7 years to train another doctor. However, there is no guarantee that we are replacing the same doctor of the same caliber of a doctor. So HIV/AIDS has killed many people who were skilled people, and as a result of that, that was hindering the growth of the country, because businesses were losing assets, businesses were losing human capital. And then lately it's COVID-19 now. COVID-19 also is blocking the growth. Look at the economic growth of different countries, how COVID-19 has affected different countries' economies. So COVID-19 also plays a role in what? In blocking the growth of the country, because of the lockdowns, where you find that many businesses have to be closed down and they are unable to produce anything as a result of COVID-19. So that is again another new barrier to economic growth. Maybe we can add others if they are still available. So they are not only limited to the ones that I have provided to you now. And then let us look now at the standard of living. Remember, the standard of living is the measure of economic development. So standard of living focuses on the quality of people of life that people are living, as I said before. So income is very important determinant of the quality of life people are living. So if people do not have any income, definitely we cannot expect them to live the good quality of life. So we can look at the per capita income. The per capita income means it is income per person. Per capita income, every time when you hear them talking about income per capita or GDP per capita, you must know that they are talking about income per person. So that would now be the average income that a person receives in a country. So the quality and the quantity of goods and services that are available to the population also is very important measure of economic standard of living. So obviously, if people, for example, do have water and electricity, water and sanitation and all that, that can show that indeed there is an improvement in the standard of living. However, if people do not have such services, such as water, electricity, and other important services procured to them, then we can tell that there is poor standard of living. Access to quality of healthcare and education. In South Africa, our government is spending the government budget. Large portion of the government budget goes to healthcare and education, because those are very important for the standard of living of people. Healthcare, remember we said, if the government does not provide good healthcare to the workers, then many people will die from different illnesses. And when people are dying from different illnesses, then obviously our country will not grow, because we are consistently losing the skills. We will die from many diseases and the zoonoses. Zoonoses are those diseases that are caused by animals. such as COVID-19, one would believe that it's a zoonosis because it was said that it's a disease that comes from the animals. So government is also spending the large portion of money for education, because we said that education gives you skills. And when you have skills, you will get better jobs. And when you get better jobs, you will be able to get yourself an income, and you will be able to save and create yourself wealth. So that is the reason why government would also spend large portion of the money towards those. So a country that is developed, one can look at the healthcare system of such country. One can also look at the education levels within those countries and the physical circumstances of the population. The physical circumstances of the population really now refers to the backgrounds where people are living, or the areas where do they come from. They say something about the standard of living. So if you find that people are still living in communities where they live in shacks, in communities where they use communal taps, in communities where they still use the bucket system of toilets, or they still use the pit toilet systems, then it tells you that the standard of living in this particular community has still not improved. So ladies and gentlemen, this was the last slide of the day. We have finished the chapter on economic growth. So economic development will be looked into in detail in the following presentation. That will not be today, but it will be in weeks to come. I have managed and I've tried my all to cover the entire chapter in these 2 hours. So I might have not done it the way you expect it to be done because I was pressed of time. Thank you very much and good luck. Bye-bye.